Aspire Communication provides a wide variety of image, publicity and branding services to established industries and emerging talent. For nearly 20 years, Aspire has worked with a diverse roster of over 120 technology, health, political and talent clients, garnering regional and national awards in the United States. So if you're in need of a publicity and branding services, call 888 405 6730 or visit www.aspirecommunications.com.
Well, that's enough of that crap. Welcome to Naked Zombie Paranormal Radio with your hosts, Brad Scott and Woodsy.
Hello and welcome to Australia's #1 paranormal radio show, Naked Zombie. It is the 16th of July 2011 and tonight I'm very pleased to say that I have a guest on who just blows me away. It really does excite me to have this gentleman on. I'll just explain who this gentleman is. He served as the writer, producer and host of the Mothman documentary Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicle. This is a fantastic outlook and look at what the Mothman is about. And please welcome to Naked Zombie, Mr. Travis Shortt. G'day Travis, how are you? And thank you for taking my call all the way from Virginia.
Oh, hey, no problem. My pleasure. Things are going very well on this end and very excited to be on Naked Zombie.
Oh, thank you, Travis. I appreciate that, mate. Now, listen, we're going to get kicked off straight away because the Mothman documentary, Dark Wings, I mean, what was the whole precipice for you to come up with this idea to do? I mean, there have been documentaries done in the past, but not like this. This is different.
It was. The genesis kind of started back in 2000, probably 2000, and Charlie McCracken, my business partner, and I were actually at Area 51 in Nevada doing a little research there on another project that we were working on. And while we were there, we stopped at a little place called the Area 51 Research Facility, which, don't let that fool you, it's nothing more than an old single-wide trailer that actually had some old magazines, newspaper articles, and books in it. And one of the books was this kind of a compilation of weird and abnormal events from all over the world throughout history. And one of the stories was on the original sightings of the Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, between 1966 and 1967. And Charlie and I, driving back from Area 51, which is in Rachel, Nevada, back to Las Vegas where we were staying, it was about a 90-minute drive. And as I'm driving, he's reading and outlining this, and we kind of filed it away in the back of our minds. And then in 2003, we were undertaking another film project in Ashland, Kentucky, for a small college there. And after we finished shooting, we were at a gas station filling up and getting some snacks for the trip back, and we picked up a road map, and Charlie noticed that we were about 90 miles from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So we decided to just make a detour, went on into Point Pleasant, and started talking to some of the folks there and meeting some of the town folks, some of the original eyewitnesses even, in just that one little excursion going in. And what we discovered was there was a lot more to the story than was in the book. And by this time, the movie The Mothman Prophecy, starring Richard Gere and Laura Linney, had already come out, based on the book by John Keel. And we realized there was a lot more to the story than what was in Keel's book, than what was in the movie, and then what had been in the book we picked up at Area 51.
Yep.
So we started laying the groundwork for doing a feature documentary. As you mentioned, a lot of things have been done on Mothman, but they had typically been either segments of an anthology. Unsolved Mysteries has done those things back in the 80s and early 90s. Discovery Channel, History, Travel, Animal Planet has all done small 15 to 30-minute pieces on the event. And so we started watching all of those and looking, and then also doing our own research. And we spent 6 years working on the documentary. We started in March of 2003. We premiered the screening version at the Mothman Festival in September 2009. So in that almost 6.5 year time frame, we did a great deal of original research, tracking down the original eyewitnesses, as many as we could.
Yep.
Also, the historical aspects, going all the way back to the 1700s with the original curse by Chief Cornstalk that was supposedly uttered at his death there when it was Camp Point Pleasant. And working our way all the way through to modern times, and one of the last things that we bring up is a timeline at the end of the documentary, starting with the curse of Cornstalk in the 1770s, all the way through to, we end up with a very interesting correlation and connection between the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the unfortunate and tragic events of September 11th, 2001, with the terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. So we spent a great deal of time doing all of that, talking to folks, and we wanted to do a feature-length documentary on the sightings and create for the first time a literal snapshot of what was taking place, not only with the original eyewitnesses, but the aftermath. And that's something that I think, and I think you would agree, as someone who is interested in the paranormal and the supernatural, a lot of emphasis is placed on the event when it happens. UFO sightings, hauntings, any type of event that is traumatic, but very seldom is there follow-up to see what the aftermath is like.
Now, sorry to interrupt. Now, you said you started producing the series in 2003. Now, the Mothman Prophecies came out in 2002. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I think it premiered in the U.S. in either the winter of 2001 or spring 2002. Yeah.
Now, and it took you literally 6 years to put this and this is why this sets this documentary apart. Because the amount of effort and time that was put into this documentary, that's why the footage, the interviews, the structure, it's like I said, I've never seen anything like it. It is just so well put together.
Well, I appreciate that.
No, I mean, but we've all seen TV shows. We've all seen, everyone's seen ideas on the Mothman and stuff like that, and they've only ever been short segments, like you said, and the prophecies was good, but when you took the legend of the Mothman and you spoke to the individuals, especially with the bridge collapse and stuff like this, and where the Mothman has been seen in certain natural disasters and stuff like that, what was going through your mind? Were you thinking, wow, there's more to this than what people realize? What was the outcome?
Most definitely. That was one of the things that we were intrigued with when we hit Point Pleasant for the first time and started talking to the eyewitnesses, was that even 40 years later, the eyewitnesses to this event were still terrorized and traumatized. We interviewed Linda Scarberry, who unfortunately passed away a few months ago. But Linda was kind of the pinnacle eyewitness for Mothman. It was her and her then husband, and then another couple that were at what is called the TNT area, the munitions manufacturing facility back in World War II that was just outside of Point Pleasant, where Mothman was seen for the first time. And Linda has been interviewed by just about every major film company, film crew that has worked on anything Mothman related.
Yep.
But we took Linda, and it took us a long time to get Linda comfortable enough to talk on camera again, but we took Linda back to the original sighting. And it was very interesting. We were in our van, and I was driving, and Charlie was in the passenger seat, and then Linda and her daughter and son-in-law were in the back of the van, and I was watching in the rearview mirror, and Linda just began to fold in on herself. She began to hunch over. She began to look very troubled, very burdened, very, very oppressed. We got back to the site, and this was early summer in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and it sits on the Ohio River. It's very hot, very humid there. And we're at the original site. We're interviewing her, and she is shivering. I mean, she's just shaking as she recounts the story. So the more we got to talking to individuals, the more we saw how this impacted their lives, the more we realized, you often, in investigating the paranormal, you come across individuals that are seeking attention. They're looking for their 15 minutes of fame. They're looking to capitalize on something. These are individuals we literally had to beg them to come out and tell their story, and 40 years later, they are still terrorized and traumatized. So there were three of us working on the film: Charlie McCracken, who was acted as the director, myself, and then my cousin and very good friend Matthew Fleming. And we acted as the executive producers. Matthew and I also did all the research. Charlie did all of the graphics. And that's one of the things that we're very proud of with the Dark Wings documentary, is that our Mothman, you do see him. In the other things, you never see Mothman. You see shadows, you see drawings. But Charlie spent about probably 2,000 or more man-hours creating a fully computer-generated Mothman that was a composite of all of the eyewitness accounts.
Because in all the eyewitness accounts, he's always got the same red eyes, doesn't he?
Red eyes, there are three pieces of physical traits that are always the same.
Yep.
Red eyes, height, and wings. And that's one of the things, for about 4 years there, I was speaking at the Mothman Festival. I was the keynote speaker every Sunday because I addressed the Mothman sightings from a religious perspective, coming from a theological background. I would apply certain religious symbology to what was taking place with the Mothman sightings, and that was one of the largest crowds. And I don't say that to promote myself. It was just people were very interested because it had never been done. No one had ever looked at the Mothman from a religious worldview.
No.
So we, one of the things that I posited the last year that I spoke there was that if you look at the original sightings between 66 and 67, 13 months, between November 15th, 1966, December 15th, 1967, with the collapse of the bridge, there were over 100 Mothman across 5 counties in West Virginia. Those 100 eyewitnesses all saw something that they described as being very tall, having wings, and red glowing eyes. Now, there were certain discrepancies. Some people would say it was 6 feet tall, some 9 feet tall. Some said the wings looked like bat wings. Some said they looked like bird wings. Some said they looked like angel wings. The red eyes were always constant. I was the first person to posit that there probably was not just one Mothman, but actually that there were multiple entities.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing like in the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch and that. There's different. Exactly. There's the swamp ape. There's the Yeti. There's the Yowie. Each continent or each location may have a different breed of them, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. So is that your belief that there are different versions of the Mothman?
Well, we've been asked that because there are 3 of us that were working on it, and all 3 of us have different views as to what Mothman may have been. Charlie McCracken is very open to Mothman being anything. Matthew Fleming, very much, because Matthew's background is environmental science, and very much, if you look at the facility where Mothman was first seen, the TNT area, a lot of chemicals stored there back during World War II and to the present day. A lot of nuclear reactors in the area, a lot of atomic energy places in the area. Matthew leans much more towards some type of mutation from all of the chemicals and the radiation. My particular belief is that the Mothman, as he is described, is actually the manifestation of a demonic presence in Point Pleasant and in other locations. Lynn Marzulli, who I think is going to be on your program in the coming weeks, is a good friend of mine and also worked with us on Mothman. Lynn has a very interesting perspective. He has a series of fiction books, a trilogy called the Nephilim Trilogy, and then he also has several nonfiction works, and highly recommend those to anyone who's interested in the concept of fallen angels, demons, the Nephilim. Lynn and I worked very, very painstakingly to see if there was a correlation between the Mothman sightings and his theory as to the Nephilim. And I'm sure he will talk to you about that when you guys have your interview, so I'm not going to get into his area of expertise. But there's one particular, or a couple of pieces of information that are very interesting when it comes to the Nephilim. Number one, they are huge in stature, between 9 and 12 feet tall. They often have wings. They have a ferocious-sounding voice. They emanate a horrible odor, such as sulfur. And one of the physical characteristics is they have 6 digits, 6 fingers, 6 toes.
Wow.
In one of my, and this just happened, and this was one of the things that was very interesting as we worked on the documentary. A lot of times there would just be these coincidental happenings that would always add another dimension to the film, and that's one of the reasons it took so long. What started out as one project quickly evolved into something else and has actually taken on a life of its own, and we're working on a sequel. But in one of the Mothman festivals, I was set up at our booth, and we were talking to people and just introducing ourselves and telling them what we were working on. And a lady walked up, and she was the daughter of Newell Partridge, who was also one of the first eyewitness accounts. His sighting of Mothman happened the night before Linda Scarberry's.
Yep.
But his daughter was telling me about that night, and she remembered it, vividly, going out with her dad. He had a shotgun. Their dog Bandit ran off chasing this thing. And the next morning, she said she went out to the field where they had seen this creature. And in the ground, there were distinguishable, discernible footprints. And I never asked her anything. I didn't lead. She just came out. She said, and the most bizarre thing was that there were 6 imprints in the ground as if this thing had 6 toes.
So what you're saying is this could be a big thing. I mean, if these are related to each other in some way, and you're saying because all the chemical or the bunkers and stuff like that, a mutation has taken effect. I mean, this is categorized as the whole basis of these two marrying up together. How does that is very possible, and this is what's quite exciting, and that's why I love getting you folks on the show, is because you're given a totally different aspect to what the Mothman is. Here in Australia, we've heard about the Mothman. We don't have anything like that here at all. Not in our sort of culture. But in the Mothman in the States, what we know about is this big thing with wings, red eyes that appeared on bridges and has been seen jumping in front of cars and all the rest of them taken off again. But having these two marry up together could explain a lot that's going on because they are so big. And if you're saying they've got 6 digits, I mean, that's just mind-blowing.
It is, and to my knowledge, this is the first time that particular theory has been applied to Mothman. And anyone that is familiar with theology and religion, and not even Judeo-Christian religion, but the other world religions, winged entities make appearances in all of them. Ancient Sumeria, Babylon, Egypt, the Native Americans, the Mayans, Hinduism, all of these world religions have this amazing pantheon of winged messengers that are many times dispensing judgment, many times they're protecting, many times they are bringing messages of doom, many times they're bringing messages of deliverance. But it's a very interesting approach when you look at the Mothman sightings, especially in reference to the collapse of the bridge. Was the Mothman there to destroy the bridge and to claim those lives? Was he the angel of death? Because many people, once we have started going down that road, that theory has come out, that he was there to claim those lives. There is the theory maybe he was there to simply forewarn in some form or fashion that this event was going to occur.
And that he really had nothing to do with it. It's just
exactly
Did you ever see the episode of I think it was Paranormal State, where they had Chip Coffey and they actually went to this location to see if they can contact the Mothman that way? And Chip Coffey's standing in the bunker, and this is where you're talking about where they had a lot of chemicals stored and stuff like that. And he actually says he was like bringing in the Mothman and all the rest of it, and he was saying no, the Mothman had nothing to do with the actual bridge collapse itself. He was not there to have it to cause any damage. But from what I understand, a lot of the townsfolk who lost loved ones in that bridge collapse blame him solely. They swear the Mothman actually is responsible for the bridge collapsing and taking all those lives.
And it's very interesting too when you mention that, when you go into the town of Point Pleasant, and it's a beautiful town. But the people today, 40 some years later, are still divided. You will have half of the town literally that will tell you these things happened, people saw this, we've seen it, this is what happened, and then you still have half the town that is in denial and refuses to admit it. They say it's a hoax. They say these were just a bunch of teenagers that were high on drugs back in the 60s and 70s, and this is what they saw. And it's a very divided town. One of the things that we had talked about doing was actually trying to, maybe in the next documentary, go and try to call a town hall meeting and see if we could get both groups to come in and just sit down and deal with this particular division in the town, because one of the things that we tried to do in the documentary was also show how that with the collapse of the Silver Bridge, literally the town of Point Pleasant was cut off from the rest of the world. The Silver Bridge connected Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio, and it was only about a 2-mile bridge. But when that bridge collapsed, it took almost 10 years for the bridge to be rebuilt.
And they actually built it in a separate location, didn't they? They actually didn't build it on the original.
Exactly, they moved it further down south of where the original bridge stood.
Yep.
But what that meant was, if you were in, Point Pleasant, you wanted to go to Gallipolis, Ohio, what had been a 2-mile drive, now you had to go 10 miles upriver to the next town, cross the bridge, and come 10 miles back down. So it was a 20-mile trip one way. And you're talking 1966 in rural West Virginia. So what happened, and it's very evident now, if you look from an aerial standpoint at Point Pleasant and Gallipolis, Ohio, opposite sides of the Ohio River, all of the economic development is in Ohio.
Yep.
There's nothing in the town of Point Pleasant. Absolutely nothing.
So basically they lost a lot of the e-commerce and stuff. A lot of their businesses shut down because of this collapse, didn't they? Actually, basically moved half the town up the road.
It literally blew the town off the road.
Yeah.
I mean, they had nothing. It has only been in the past decade that the town has started any type of downtown economic revitalization, trying to attract businesses in. They just, in the past 5 years, got their first franchise restaurant. Everything else had all been just locally owned type
and
businesses.
Operated, basically. Yeah.
So
but they also rely on now a lot of the businesses rely on the Mothman as a tourist point, as an attraction to come to their town because of this tragedy.
Most definitely. Yes.
There's actually like a shop or a museum there now or something that's just dedicated to the Mothman.
Mothman Museum.
Yep.
There's the Mothman Museum. They have a lot of some of the props from the movie. Of course, they did not shoot the movie with Richard Gere and Laura Linney in Point Pleasant. They shot it in a small town in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That is very similar to the town of Point Pleasant. They did an excellent job of finding a replica of the town.
Yes. Hello, you there, mate?
Memorabilia from
sorry.
John Keel. I'm here. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I just lost you for about 2 seconds there, but we'll just keep going. Sorry, mate, continue.
Oh, that's fine. Sorry. There's a lot of the memorabilia from John Keel, a lot of his photographs and autographs, and one of his original manuscripts for the Mothman Prophecies. All of those things are there. It's a great place. They show a lot of the documentaries that we've talked about from the History Channel, Discovery Channel, all of those things.
Yeah.
And Jeff Walmsley, who kind of set up the museum, and Carolyn Harris, who has Harris Steakhouse, which if people have seen the movie, when Richard Gere is sitting in the booth and he's watching about the plane crash, that's modeled after the Harris Steakhouse that's run by Carolyn Harris. She lost her husband and son in the collapse of the bridge. And she's just been a wonderful friend over the past few years that we've worked on that. But Walmsley has written 2 books about the Mothman, and I definitely want to give him a plug because he's helped us a lot over the past few years. But he has Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend, and then also Behind the Red Eyes. Those 2 books by Jeff Walmsley, which are available at Amazon, are amazing pieces of local book writing, as he has gone and done his own investigation, original newspaper clippings, his own interviews with some of the eyewitnesses, and just a very, very in-depth look at the events that took place, because he was alive when it was happening. He remembers, all of the things that were going on. He lived next door to Linda Scarberry and her mom and dad, so he had an inner working knowledge of these people and their lives, and his research into the whole Mothman mythos and story is just amazing.
Because I remember when they actually brought out the Mothman Prophecies, they actually had a lot of problems during the production of that. There was a lot of weird events that happened around shooting that they just couldn't explain at the time. Did you guys have any problems at all? Or did you find there was just like, I think at one stage, I think they got approached by some people saying, what was it? You can't. We don't want you to make this movie. Blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. Did you guys come across anything like that? Any strange sort of events?
Almost from the very beginning, there were lots of weird things that took place. We did, like I said, 6 years, and in that 6 years, we would take about 6 trips a year to Point Pleasant to shoot scenes and recreations and interviews and things like that. It was probably year 2, probably first or second trip in. And when we come back from that trip, my business partner Charlie McCracken he wakes up one morning and he can't move. He's sick. All these different physical ailments that he never had before. Went to the hospital. Was in the hospital about 2 weeks. They could not find any known cause for the ailment and the sickness and the illness and he was in the point that after about 3 days his kidneys were shutting down, other organs were beginning to shut down. They just did not know what was wrong. And after about 2 weeks, all of that subsided and everything was okay, but they never found a definitive cause for that. I and another individual, shortly after undertaking this, I was coming back from West Virginia one evening, fell asleep behind the wheel, had a horrible car accident, totaled the car that I was in. I walked away, unharmed, but it's still kind of a sobering thought. Another friend of mine that was at the Mothman Festival that year had flown into Ohio, driven over to the festival. On her drive back to Ohio after the festival, she had a car accident, totaled the car that she was in. There was one evening coming back from Point Pleasant late. It was like 2, 3 a.m. And we're driving on the interstate, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these bright lights hit us in the rearview mirror. Not coming over the hill, not coming out of the horizon, just like they were there all along. All of a sudden, the lights are on. This black car speeds past us and disappears in front of us, disappears into the blackness. We drive on for a few miles, never pass the car. Travis Shortt.
Travis, it's Brad. Sorry about that. Something funny went on, mate. We just got cut off.
It happens when talking about Mothman.
It does, and I do apologise about that. But all of a sudden, I couldn't hear you. Then there was this funny overtone, and next bang, you were gone. So, and this is what you expect when you do talk about the Mothman.
Happens every time.
It happens every time. I've had conversations with people in the past, but the thing what you're saying is that this whole thing with the Mothman, and I know what the guys doing the Mothman prophecy went through, and they had some really weird events, and you guys were going through exactly the same thing. We've just been cut off for some strange reason. That's never happened doing this, if you know what I mean, and just weird. Yeah.
I was talking to one of my clients that I represent as a publicist, Bill Bean, who is actually going to be on your show in the coming weeks as well. Bill wrote a book called Dark Force about his growing up in a haunted house in Maryland. He and I were talking late one night, probably around 2 o'clock in the morning, and we started talking about Mothman, and every time that we would get onto that topic, we would get disconnected. We would, call each other back. We'd start the conversation again. We would get disconnected. Bill is also an evangelical Christian. He began praying, and after his prayers, and take this for whatever it's worth, after his prayers, we never had any more problems or technical difficulties in that phone conversation. But every time you start talking about Mothman, this kind of thing comes up. What I was going to say was one of the interesting things that we uncovered, which I think, again, opens a whole other dimension to Mothman, and we were the first people to ever uncover this, and this was one of the areas we could not get anyone to come on camera and actually be interviewed. They would tell us off the record that the TNT area, which was originally the West Virginia Ordnance Works, where they were manufacturing trinitrotoluene, or TNT, for the efforts in World War II, that facility was built by a special organization that came to Point Pleasant during World War II and built that facility. And anyone that follows the government conspiracy theories, this is going to sound very familiar. The people in Point Pleasant were hired to work the job. They were picked up in a black school bus with blacked out windows. They were driven to this facility where they were driven into a garage. They were escorted out of the bus. They were stripped of their clothes. They were given their clothes to work in. They were put back in the bus with the black and white windows. They were then taken to the different points in this facility where they were to work. When their shift was up, the black bus would come back, pick them up, take them back. The process would be repeated. That happened every day. After that facility was completed, that special organization left. They then went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and built the Oak Ridge Nuclear Facility. There's one other facility in the U.S. that organization supposedly built.
Yep.
That organization is Groom Lake, Nevada, Area 51.
Do you reckon there's how do I word this? There is a constellation between the two, Area 51 and Point Pleasant, where these events has Mothman been considered to be of extraterrestrial nature or anything like that by anybody? That's what I mean. It's there's a lot of coincidences when it comes to this bloke or thing, if you want to call it.
There are. John Keel in the original book, started out with the theory that Mothman wasn't extraterrestrial. His eventual theory, and we talked to Keel on several occasions. He would never let us interview him. Keel was a recluse and very, very eccentric type individual. We did have several phone.
I do apologise again, Travis. We'll go for round 3. Like we're saying, I've been constantly recording this because I'm not going to edit this out, because the point being, like you're saying before, every time the Mothman gets mentioned or discussed, weird stuff starts happening.
It does.
This is the 3rd time now we've been cut off for no apparent reason. Like I said, you just go silent, I get this funny noise, and bang, it's all over Red Rover. So hopefully this is the last time it will happen.
I hope so.
We've only got another 25 minutes to go for the interview, so we're going to try and get through it. And look, I do apologise to our listeners out there as well. This is what happens when you do stuff on the paranormal. Sometimes there are forces out there that probably don't want you to tell your story, and we just got to deal with it accordingly. So please, Travis, keep going, mate.
We were talking about the possible correlation between Mothman, extraterrestrials.
Yes.
In Point Pleasant, and this was one of the things that we loved about the town, we found very interesting, is, you have a lot of places where you'll have, out in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S., for example, you'll have Bigfoot sightings.
Yep.
You have, UFO sightings in various places. You'll have places that occasionally have a haunted house or things like that. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, is one of those places that has this, it's almost like a magnet for the paranormal. You had Mothman, you had Men in Black, you had UFO sightings, you have haunted houses. Just outside of Point Pleasant was the Lake State Mental Hospital, and it had been an orphanage and been run by some very unorthodox individuals. There were rumors of ice pick lobotomies, children dying, going on being buried in unmarked graves. We went into this facility one day not knowing what it was. We just saw it standing out in the middle of nowhere, but it looked like a really cool building to go in, and we just went in with a handheld camera, and we were videotaping, and doors slamming, cold spots, sounds of footsteps running, and then when we got back and we started watching the video footage, there was all this electromagnetic interference. You could hear women screaming on the footage and that we were watching. And this is out in the middle of nowhere. There's no electrical wires whatsoever near this facility. It sits in a huge, giant vacant lot. And it was, all of these things taking place. You had cattle mutilations, and that's something a lot of people don't know about Point Pleasant. There were all of these, horse mutilations, cattle mutilations, dog mutilations that were going on in the town at the same time. There were individuals that were talking about, going out to the TNT area in the 60s and seeing, devil worshippers and occult practices and all of these things that were taking place simultaneously. And the question that begs to be asked is, are all of those things interrelated and interconnected? And in the first documentary, we make no assumptions. We do it very journalistic.
Yes.
We go in, we interview, we're very, very unbiased. We wanted the story to just be told from beginning to end. In the second film that we're working on, we are approaching it and asking some questions that we want answers to. Are these events related? Is there an underlying force, an underlying entity that is at work in the town of Point Pleasant? And there's just some very weird things that take place. That my friend Charlie McCracken has impeccable sense of direction. I mean, we can be anywhere, and he can tell you what direction you're traveling in, how long it's going to take you to get somewhere. We set foot in the town of Point Pleasant, and he totally becomes disoriented. He has no idea north, south, east, or west. He has no concept of what is happening, and it's just this very bizarre kind of impact that it has on everyone who comes there.
Do you find that the local folk who live in in this place, is there high, I mean, I know this is probably terrible to say, but has there been high the rates of people taking their own lives with suicides? Is there high medical conditions, like people getting sick from disease, like cancer and stuff? Is there anything that stands out above the norm when it comes to the folk at this place?
It's very interesting that you ask that question, because on one of our trips, we spent an entire day at the local newspaper in their morgue, and
Yep.
just pouring through newspaper articles from the years preceding the Mothman sightings and in the subsequent years following. And Point Pleasant, West Virginia is a very small town. You're talking about probably around 5,000 individuals.
Yeah, it's not
right
big.
now. No, not big at all. It's a very, very small town. It's a very rural town. It's a river town, a lot of farm country, but very, very small town mentality. As we were looking at these newspaper stories, the number of suicides, murders, car accidents, unsolved crimes, just the sheer number in this town had to blow it off the maps if you put it into perspective per capita. I mean, we were flipping through one newspaper, and it was like, for almost a solid month, there were car accidents and unsolved murders. And one of the tragedies in Point Pleasant took place in the 70s, where this woman was accused of killing her children, and she was being held in the county jail. Her husband comes in supposedly to see her and bring her a change of clothes with her suitcase, and because it's a small town, they let him go into the cell, and there's a couple of deputies sitting outside. He sits the suitcase down. It's in the middle of winter. He opens his coat. He pulls out a shotgun. He shoots the suitcase. It's full of dynamite.
Oh.
He blew himself, his wife, 3 deputies out of this world.
That's unreal. I mean, like I said, it is a small town. I mean, nothing against the town at all, and we don't want to give people that impression, but
No.
to having that population per capita, as you were saying, and having all these strange events that happened before and after the Mothman incident, and look, the car accident yourself had, and a colleague of yours, and the strange events that followed, it really makes you consider, was it really... I mean, the documentary is fantastic, but when you're doing this, do you really want to go for round 2, if you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, we have, that has been a question that we have debated for the past couple of years, because we screened the film in 2009. It was met with rave reviews in Point Pleasant.
Yes.
But we got some interesting feedback from the folks, some things they wanted to see, some things that, because when we did the first edit on the documentary, it was over 4 hours long, and we knew it had, we're not Peter Jackson. This is not Lord of the Rings, so we are not going to go with a documentary that's long.
No.
So we edited it. We kept editing until we got it down to about 75 minutes.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff that ended up on the floor, and we wanted to put a lot of that back in. So what we've done is we've gone into re-edits. We're putting a lot of stuff back in, and then, like I said, there was a lot of interviews that were about the religious implications, and that's where we got the idea to do the sequel, Dark Wings 2: The Dark Messenger. Mm-hmm. And we're really wanting to do that. Been talking to Lynn Marzulli about it. We really want him to come on board and help as an expert. And what we're trying to do is we're wanting to bring together religious experts from all the major world religions and the historians for those world religions that are no longer really active, and get them sitting in a room and talk about the event and how it impacted the lives.
No, I think that would make an incredible documentary, to be honest with you, Travis, because when you put together religious leaders in that aspect, the concepts of what they're going to come up with, and the thought processes involved in each religious base being different on the one subject, it'd be very interesting to see what the actual outcome. I reckon it'd get quite heated at times as well.
Well, I'm hoping. That's one of the.
You've got to have a good bit of spark in there, mate.
Like that. It's good because I love honest discussion, and I want people to dialogue and be able to get to the root of this question and this issue. Going back to the town of Point Pleasant for just a second, that's one of the things. They erected a statue of Mothman
Yep.
in the town square. And that was something that kind of divided the town. Again, you had a lot of the religious leaders, the pastors, the ministers, people like that, that didn't feel like it was right to erect this statue. That if you look at it, and if anyone has ever seen this statue, it was a beautiful piece of artwork by a local sculptor, but it's very demonic looking. He's got the glowing red eyes, you've got these horrible wings, these giant claws, this gaping mouth, and there were a lot of people that were very, very taken aback and offended by the fact that it's there. So you've got a lot of tension still in the town today, even though, as you and I were talking before, they're using Mothman to their advantage now. Mothman Festival started out actually in 2001, and very small turnout, but in the past few years, they've had 10, 20, 30,000 people come out over the course of that weekend from all over the world.
And that's probably their main business point now, isn't it? Just keep the town going. I mean, unfortunately, from actually a disastrous event, and we know but people are drawn to things like that, especially tourists who have heard the stories and heard the legends and the myths of these sort of things. It's like any sort of major catastrophe that has had some sort of paranormal tag attached to it. People are going to be fascinated. It's like the Roswell incident, isn't it? Every year, people go out there on a daily basis to try and experience something of a paranormal or ET's type nature. It's just humans, the way we think.
It is. I mean, I think we're all intrigued by the unexplained. If there's a mystery out there, we want to try to solve it, and even if we don't want to try to solve it, it's kind of nice to be part of it.
Of course.
And to be involved in it. And we felt that way early on with Mothman. We still feel that way today. And like I said, we've had a lot of bad things have happened in the course of working with Mothman. My marriage collapsed. My wife and I divorced during the process of working on the film. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, Charlie had a lot of health problems. There were a lot of financial problems. All of these things that began taking place. And it would be very easy to blame Mothman, because there is a website, and I'm sure folks are familiar with it. It's Curse of Mothman, and there's an individual that will list anytime something bad happens to someone who's associated with the Mothman, they go up on the website.
They do.
And so it'd be very easy to point my finger and blame Mothman for the collapse of my marriage, which I may do that in a counseling session at some point. Just blame Mothman. It's his fault that my marriage collapsed.
Yep.
But when you step back and you really look at the big picture, there's always underlying problems, and what was maybe the fact that some of these things happened because we were overworking ourselves, we were spending late night hours, we weren't eating, we weren't sleeping, we weren't spending time with our family and friends, we were focused entirely on getting a project done. Or maybe there is a supernatural element. Maybe there is a curse of Mothman. Going back to the Genesis story of Mothman with Chief Cornstalk, there are two versions of that story. Cornstalk, who was a chief of one of the Native American tribes, was supposed to have uttered a curse on the land where Point Pleasant is situated, so that it would never find peace for 200 years. That 200 years would have ended in the 1970s. One of the last great disasters in the town of Point Pleasant. Like I said, we do a timeline. We go through and list everything from Cornstalk through the late 70s that transpired. And then the one thing that we did throw in there toward the end, which has blown the minds of a lot of people, is that if you look at FAA flight patterns on September 11th, 2001, the plane that was flown into the Pentagon actually was hijacked directly over Point Pleasant, West Virginia. That's when the hijackers overtook it.
I mean, these are things that are just mind-blowing when you're looking at them at the end of the day. These are circumstantial events that are just too non-circumstantial, if you know what I mean. There's just too much out there with this whole legend that you can't sort of question it in some way. I mean, I know personally myself that one of the things I want to do when I eventually get over to the States myself is stand at the bridge site just to take in and experience it for myself. It's probably not the smartest thing in the world, that after listening to you talk about it, that I want to do now. But I mean, I still want to do it. I still want to be drawn to that area and to stand there just at that bank and go, "That's incredible. What's happened here?" And go through the town and check it out. One day, hopefully.
Well, you get here, we'll go together.
Sounds good, mate.
We love Point Pleasant. I mean, we do. You were talking about coincidences. I know we're running out of time, but this one is just one that blew my mind.
No,
away.
please go.
My wife and I were still married at the time. My wife was a college professor. She teaches communication. One day while we were working on the film, this was probably about 3, maybe 4 years in, about 3 years in, to the production. She comes in and she hands me a manila envelope, and she said, "This was in my mailbox at work." And I open it up, and it is a PhD thesis that was being written in the late 1960s, early 1970s by an individual at a university in Tennessee. And they were writing their thesis on Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And the Battle of Point Pleasant, which many historians now consider to be the first battle of the American Revolution. This individual went through, and there's a pivotal event in the original curse by Chief Cornstalk, that there were 2 hunters from Point Pleasant that were out on an excursion, and one of them was killed by hostile Native Americans. Mm-hmm. One of them fled back to Camp Point Pleasant, told what happened. Out of rage, Cornstalk, who was either already being held prisoner or who was living there, depending on which version of the story that you hear, he and his son are brought, out into the midst of the angry camp settlers, and they're murdered, and they're killed. And as they're dying, Cornstalk utters this curse. Well, I was living in a place called Castlewood, Virginia, which in the 1700s was Castle's Woods, Virginia. The 2 hunters that were killed in Point Pleasant were from the town that I was living in at the time.
What do you call that?
People had talked about these hunters. All these different documentaries, and different films talk about these hunters, but no one ever had a name for them. I had their names. Now, the bizarre coincidence is we don't know where the dissertation came from. We don't know where the thesis came from. It was just in a manila envelope stuck in my ex-wife's mailbox on the campus where she works, not the campus where this thesis was written. It was just stuck there, and with a note to the effect, "This may help your husband in his research."
That's pretty incredible. I mean, to get, that's just mind blowing in a lot of ways. While we're on the subject of the actual movie itself, now, would you like to tell people in Australia and Australasia and China, who people listen to us as well, if they haven't seen it, and please, folks, do take the time to get this movie. It just blew me away. Where can people actually still get this to watch it?
Right now, the only thing that is available is, and these are collector's items.
They are
the screening DVD. We screened it at Point Pleasant and at a theater in Virginia. We have about 30 copies of that DVD left, and it's a collector's item because there are a couple of errors in some of the edits. But each of them is also signed by myself, Charlie McCracken, and Matthew Fleming. So you have the director and the autograph of both executive producers.
Well, you can put one of those aside just with my name on it.
I will have one sent to you. But more of those can be available. All that they have to do is to just email me, and that would be Travis, Travis, at Aspire Communications. That's AspyreCommunications.com. AspireCommunications.com. If they're interested in getting that. We are hoping that within the next several months, we don't have a completed date yet, the new version will be out. That will be available, and as soon as that's available, there will be announcements. It will go up on several different websites announcing that the new version is available. But right now, there is a collector's edition that is available. If folks are interested, they can email me, and we'll kind of go from there and see what happens.
And when you do release the new one, please let me know, Travis, and I'll put it out on Naked Zombie as well, mate, if you know what I mean. I'll put it out there that this actually is available for other people, because I do get a lot of people, when they hear someone speak, "Oh, where can I get this from? Where can I get that from?" If you know what I mean. So I'm more than happy to help you out as well with that, Travis, mate. Definitely.
I tell you, I'll make a deal with you, Brad. I will give you the exclusive opportunity when it's done. When the new one's done, I will let you be the first person out of the inner circle to see it.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'll come back on, and yours will be the first interview that I do announcing that it's available.
Oh, look, I can't thank you enough just for that, Travis.
We'll
and you hear
that way.
Mate, we'll hear that, folks. Well, you heard it first on Naked Zombie. When the new one gets released, it'll be on the show. You'll be able to listen to it and be able to speak to Travis again on what it's about. Now, Travis, we're coming up to the end of the hour, mate, and these things always go so quickly. I'm telling you, I should start doing a longer show. Just on within closing, mate, was there anything else in particular while doing the documentary, The Dark Winds, Chronicle of a Mothman, that just took you totally off guard, took you by surprise, that just left you questioning everything that you originally thought about it?
Other than, I went into it, all three of us did, myself, Charlie McCracken, and Matthew Fleming, all went into it very level-headed, very hard facts, and I think all of us walked away a little shaken in different ways. There were always, every trip, there was always something else we were uncovering, some other connection to other paranormal events, other locations, other tragedies, all of those things. And each time that we did that, we were always taken aback. We were always startled a little bit and kind of shaken to our core. And I will tell you one story, and this one, I haven't told this one that often, but this is one of the things that intrigued Lynn Marzulli when he and I were talking. We were up there in, I want to say this was August, probably of 2005, I believe. It was either 2005 or 2006. We were out in the TNT area. It's summertime. We've got the windows up, air conditioner going. We're driving down. The stretch of road in the TNT area was so popular in the 60s among the teenagers because they would go drag race there because it was just a flat stretch of road for almost as far as you can see. We're driving down the stretch of road. We come to a T intersection, that stop sign. We're sitting there, again, the car's running, air conditioner's going, windows rolled up. There is the most god-awful sound that comes from out in the foliage, out in the woods. It is a cross between a scream and a howl and a yell, and it is animalistic, but it has a human element. I mean, it is this very similar to when people are talking about a Bigfoot sighting or a Sasquatch, this horrible sound that's what we heard. All three of us just looked at each other, and we were like, what the hell was that? And I mean, the hair standing up on our arms, because again, the windows were rolled up, car was running, air conditioner blasting, and this thing still literally reverberated in the car. We turned around, we drove back into town, we found the first bar that we could, we went in and we got the biggest bottle of scotch that we could, and we just started doing shots.
You sure you're not Australian? So something we'd do, mate. Nothing like I've got a shot scotch. Oh, yeah,
but, I mean, that shook us to our core. It was just a terrifying moment. I mean, it was broad daylight. This wasn't nighttime. Broad daylight. And if anyone has read John Keel's book, John Keel talks about a stretch of road on that, or a section of that stretch of road, where he would drive through it and he would just become terrorized. He would be frozen with fear. And then he would drive a little ways and it would be gone. And he could always tell when he was in that area. And we've often wondered if we were not at that location, if there was not something there physically, if we were not driving through some type of dead zone, some type of, or a hot spot of paranormal activity. But that sound literally shook us. I can still hear it in my head. I can't explain it. I can't describe it. And I've had several people ask me, and I can't. It is just a horrible sound that we heard that day, and that is one of the things that terrified me the most during the investigation.
That's incredible. I mean, and these are stories that not many people get to hear about. I mean, this is the whole idea of having fantastic guests like yourself come on, Travis, is because not many people know what actually goes on behind the scenes in a production. I mean, people get to see the finished product and they get to admire it and look at it and question it, but it's the stories behind the production. It's what people go through. Your car accidents, your friends' accidents, even doing this interview today with the amount of technical problems with it just cutting out. It never cuts out. I mean, I've spent a lot of money, so it wouldn't cut out, but it has cut out. So, you know what I mean? So little things like that. And I wouldn't be surprised later on tonight, I get a knock on the door from the Men in Black saying, you're not meant to broadcast this show. I mean, I'm joking around with that. But, I mean, these are events that happen to people all the time. Now, Travis, in closing, mate, and look, we're coming up to the end of the hour, and I cannot thank you enough again for coming on Naked Zombie. It's been an absolute pleasure. And is there anything, lastly, you'd like to say about the about Dark Wings? Is there anything you'd like to tell our listeners, and any future projects you guys got coming up that you'd like to tell us about? Are you coming to Australia? Is there anything cool news that's happening?
I would love to come to Australia.
Yep.
And like I said, when you hit the States, you call me as soon as you touch down. We will meet you. We will go to Point Pleasant. We always stay at what was the Blue Fountain. It's where John Keel stayed when he was there. It's a great little hotel just on the other side of the Ohio River. We'll get a room. We'll do some investigation. We'll take you
sounds wonderful.
Show you around. Dark Wings, we're working on the re-edit. Dark Wings 2, that has gone into pre-production. I'm writing the script right now. We're in the process of finding our experts in the different world religions and things like that. So those are the two big things that we've got going. As I mentioned, we sunk 6 years of our lives into the first one, and we are hoping that the end result, which is going to be this new edit, where we did do a lot of recreations with an actor playing John Keel.
Yep.
We didn't even get into the stuff tonight about Indrid Cold, which was another entity that was appearing in West Virginia at the same time as Mothman.
Well, listen, I'm happy to continue for a little bit longer if you are. It's up to you. Depends how late it is for you.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, we just didn't get a chance to talk about that. But if anyone watched the movie with Richard Gere and Laura Linney, there's a mesh, a merger between Mothman and Indrid Cold, which was another entity. He was not in Point Pleasant. He was appearing in Mineral Springs, West Virginia, to another individual by the name of Woodrow Derenberger. And this individual this entity that Derenberger was interacting with was very strange for rural West Virginia in the 1960s. He wore his hair very long, very slicked back. It was black. He had Middle Eastern features. He dressed all in black. He could communicate via telepathy. He was, according to Derenberger, an alien, an extraterrestrial. He supposedly took Derenberger many times to his home world, where Derenberger met, beautiful extraterrestrial individuals of both the male and female species. But all of these things were taking place, and John Keel was getting these very weird phone calls, and that's one of the things that cracked me up about the problems that you and I are having in the interview, was that's always something associated, not necessarily with Mothman, but Indrid Cold. Indrid Cold was this disembodied voice that would call John Keel and give him these prophecies, these messages about terrible events that were going to happen. They included the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the assassination of Robert Kennedy. There was supposed to be an assassination attempt on the Pope in 1968. All of these things were these supposed prophecies that were emanating from Indrid Cold. Of them, one was this very ambiguous revelation to John Keel that there was going to be a great tragedy on the Ohio River. Keel, of course, thought it referred to one of the many power plants, nuclear reactors that were there, and he just always assumed there was going to be a horrible explosion. It wasn't until he was sitting in his apartment in New York when he heard about the collapse of the Silver Bridge that he realized that was what Indrid Cold was telling him, that there was going to be this horrible event that claimed 46 lives. Two of those bodies never found, washed away by the icy depths of the Ohio River. But there were also two other individuals that were manifesting themselves along with Indrid Cold. One was a female entity that was known as Princess Leah, L-E-A, and then there was also a heavier individual that came under the name Apple, A-P-O-L. And it's this particular kind of trinity that has led a lot of individuals, Marzulli and a couple of people that I broached this subject with, to realize that there's probably something demonic and satanic going on, especially when they look at this one individual named Apple being a possible reference to the Greek word Apollyon, which is supposed to be the angel that guards the abyss from which the Antichrist will arise. So all of these elements were going on in West Virginia, which is a very bizarre place for these types of things to occur. That would be like, in the U.S., West Virginia is one of the smallest states. It's one of the most remote states. A lot of area that is still, I say undeveloped. I don't mean that in an economic way. I mean, there's just a lot of woods, a lot of forests, a lot of untainted territory by mankind. And actually, Keel is the one that points out, especially the area of West Virginia where Point Pleasant is, that was never inhabited by a single Native American tribe. They used it as hunting ground, but they would never live there.
Is there a reason why they wouldn't live there? It was just too much of the bad juju, as it were? I know I'm using terrible phrasing here, but that's what their perception was?
That's the general consensus, is there was just some type of ominous, foreboding sense that would keep them from settling there. They would hunt there.
And get out again, basically.
And they go, kill, get out,
Yeah.
So, all of this stuff taking place would be almost like choosing, in Australia, the most desolate, barren area that you could think of, and say you've got all of this paranormal activity going on there. And that's kind of what was going on in West Virginia. You had all of this stuff taking place, Men in Black, as I mentioned, and the fact that one of the things that, again, brought my expertise and my approach from the religious side is that when Keel was talking to the individuals in Point Pleasant, there were 4 young women that gave birth about the time that Mothman was making his appearance. And all of these women were being terrified by these apparitions of men in black in their home. And Keel told them, and he never would explain to anyone on the record why he told them this, but he told them that if they wanted to keep themselves and their newborn infants safe, they were going to get a gold crucifix and attach it to the wall above the crib.
And they all did that?
And they all did that.
Wow.
They all did. So it's all these little elements that come into play. And, in one of the scenes that we recreate with an actor, his name is Ben Mays, he's a phenomenal actor. We've always joked with him. He does a lot of stand-ins and recreations and a lot of crime dramas. And he was actually at a restaurant several years ago, and someone had called the police because they had seen him recreating the role of a serial killer, and they just assumed that it was him. So the police showed up, and he had to explain he was an actor and all of that. But a lot of
a lot of
his, yeah, great. A lot of his scenes he doesn't speak in them, so we actually cast him as John Keel so he could get some speaking scenes, and then of course those scenes got cut and didn't even make it into our own film.
Oh no!
We promised him those would go back in the re-edit, but we do a lot of the recreation with him writing and getting the phone calls and this very mechanical, robotic-sounding voice that was this entity, Indrid Cold, that supposedly gave these prophecies, these messages, and they were always of doom. They were always this foreboding message about something horrible that was about to take place.
So, but these are things that people are going to look forward to, isn't it? Though these are things that slowly going to be brought back into the new series.
These are things that'll be
excellent.
reinserted.
I mean, this is what my listeners are they're just going to be drooling over this information. They're just going to absolutely love it, which I'm fantastic about. Anyway, mate, listen, we gotta wrap it up. I'm sorry about that. We've gone well and truly over the hour tonight, and but definitely get you back on to talk more about this. There are so many stories that I know you have that I'm sure my listeners were just saying, "Why are you stopping it now?" Because I am restricted to the amount of download space I have. But listen, I'd just like to personally thank you on behalf of myself and my Naked Zombie listeners out there, the zombie army as I call them, who take the time to listen to us, and thank you again, Mr. Travis Shortt. So if you want to contact Travis, you can go to my website, www.brad-scott.com. You will see a link there that I'll put up, and you can contact him by that. So and besides that, everyone have a good night, have a safe night. If you're out investigating, please look after you. Good night.